The basketball world stopped on its axis this week, and the conversation has not slowed down since. Steph Curry to the Boston Celtics. The idea that would have been dismissed as fantasy 12 months ago is now circulating through every credible NBA reporting channel with an intensity that suggests this is not speculation for the sake of content, but genuine smoke around a fire that is very much burning. Let me be clear about what we know, what is being reported, and what the analytical picture looks like if this trade actually happens, because the basketball case for it is one of the most compelling roster construction arguments the league has seen in years. Start with what has been circulating. Reports emerging from multiple NBA insider sources indicate that the Golden State Warriors and Stephen Curry's camp have reached a point in their relationship where the future is genuinely uncertain in a way it has never been before. Curry turned 37 this year, and the Warriors, as currently constructed, are not a championship contender. The dynasty that produced 4 titles across 8 years is in a transitional phase that has not yet produced a clear direction, and the gap between where Golden State is now and where they would need to be to compete for a championship with Curry at the peak of what his age allows him to produce is significant and potentially unbridgeable within his remaining elite window. The Celtics connection has emerged through several channels simultaneously, which is the pattern of reporting that carries the most credibility in NBA trade discussions. When a story comes from a single source, it can be managed or denied. When it emerges across multiple reporters and from multiple angles around the same time, it reflects genuine conversations happening at the decision-making level between the relevant parties. The Boston angle specifically has been tied to the Celtics' own situation following their 2024 championship, their subsequent playoff exit, and the front office's assessment that the current core, while still excellent, may benefit from a transformative addition at exactly the stage of the season cycle where their window is still open but the urgency to maximize it is acute. Brad Stevens at the Celtics front office has built a reputation for pursuing exactly the kind of unconventional roster construction moves that other front offices either do not consider or do not have the relationships and financial flexibility to execute. The Celtics have assets. They have young players on valuable contracts. They have draft capital that has accumulated across several years of sustained success that creates trade packages other teams cannot match. And they have a roster that is already championship caliber and that, with the addition of Steph and Curry, becomes something that changes the entire conversation about who is going to win the NBA title. The reaction across the basketball world has been layered and revealing. Among former players, the dominant response has been a combination of genuine excitement about what Curry alongside Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown would look like on the floor simultaneously and genuine concern about how the roles and the ball would be distributed in a system that now contains 3 players who have each individually been the primary option on championship-caliber teams. Paul Pierce, speaking through his media platforms, said the combination would be the most terrifying offensive unit assembled in the post-Jordan era and that any defensive scheme attempting to contain all 3 simultaneously would be solving an unsolvable problem. Kendrick Perkins, characteristically direct, said the Warriors need to move Curry now if they're serious about their rebuild, and that Boston is the only destination that makes basketball sense for all parties at this specific moment. Among current players, the reaction has been more guarded publicly, but the social media activity tells its own story. Multiple NBA players liked or engaged with posts discussing the potential move in ways that reflect genuine fascination with the basketball implications. The silence from Warriors players beyond the standard diplomatic responses to trade rumor questions is itself telling. When a fanbase and a locker room are genuinely comfortable and aligned on the future, trade rumors tend to generate more active pushback from those inside the building. The media reaction has been dominated by the analytical question of whether this works as a basketball proposition, and the answer, when you examine the numbers and the tactical picture carefully, is not just yes but a resounding yes that makes this one of the clearest cases for a blockbuster trade that the league has seen in the current era. Now the analytics, and this is where the case for this trade becomes genuinely overwhelming. Stephen Curry's numbers in the 2025 to 2026 NBA season, produced at 37 years old on a Warriors team that has given him limited support and whose system has been disrupted by roster changes and coaching transitions, were still extraordinary by any objective standard. He averaged 26.4 points per game, 5th in the league among all players, and 1st among players his age by a margin that reflects how categorically different his scoring efficiency is from every other player in his age bracket in the history of the sport. His three-point shooting percentage was 41.3% on 9.8 attempts per game. Those numbers require a moment of genuine appreciation. He is attempting almost 10 three-pointers per game and making 41% of them. The league average three-point percentage across the 2025 to 2026 season was 35.1%. Curry is shooting from three at a rate that is 6 percentage points above the league average, while attempting nearly twice as many as the typical player. The volume and efficiency combination is without historical precedent. His player efficiency rating of 24.7 placed him 12th in the league. His true shooting percentage of 63.1% was the most efficient mark among the top 25 scorers in the entire NBA. What that means practically is that Curry produces more points per possession used than virtually any other high-volume scorer in the game. He is not just scoring a lot. He is scoring efficiently at a level that very few players across NBA history have sustained at any age, let alone at 37. The advanced defensive metrics tell a more complicated story that is important to address honestly rather than glossing over. Curry's defensive rating has declined with age, as it does for virtually every guard who relies on quickness and anticipation rather than size and physical dominance for his defensive contributions. His individual defensive numbers in isolation are not elite. But here is the context that matters for how he would fit in Boston. The Celtics already have one of the best defensive identities in the NBA, and that identity is built around Jaylen Brown's physicality on the perimeter, Al Horford's positional intelligence in the front court, and the collective switching and help defense principles that Brad Stevens has embedded in the system. Curry's defensive limitations in isolation become significantly less consequential within a defensive structure as sophisticated as Boston's, because the system compensates for individual matchup disadvantages in ways that Golden State's current roster cannot. The Celtics could hide Curry defensively in specific matchup assignments while allowing their other pieces to carry the primary defensive load, a luxury Golden State never truly provided because the surrounding talent was insufficient. Now, the offensive transformation. This is where the analytics become genuinely exciting, and where the case for this trade transcends the normal logic of blockbuster moves. Jason Tatum in the 2025-2026 season averaged 28.6 points, 8.4 rebounds, and 5.2 assists. His efficiency has plateaued at an elite but not historically exceptional level, with a true shooting percentage of 61.2%. The analytical observation that multiple respected basketball thinkers have made about Tatum across his career is that his ceiling as an individual scorer is connected to the defensive attention he receives, and that defensive attention is connected to how many other threats defenses have to account for simultaneously. When the Celtics at their best space the floor around Tatum with capable shooters and intelligent cutters, his efficiency rises measurably. Adding Steph and Curry to that equation does not merely add another scorer. It fundamentally changes the geometry of every defensive scheme any opposing team can deploy against the Celtics. The concept in basketball analytics called gravity is the most relevant framework for understanding what Curry does to floor spacing that goes beyond his own individual contributions. Curry's gravity, the degree to which defenses must account for him even when he does not have the ball, is the highest ever measured in NBA tracking data. He forces defensive attention from further from the basket than any other player in the history of the sport, and he maintains that gravity throughout games because defenses know that giving him even half a second of space at any point on the floor results in a made three-pointer at a rate that is statistically crippling. The defensive resources committed to tracking Curry without the ball create the open looks for every other player on the floor that are the foundation of how the Warriors built their dynasty. Place that gravity into the Celtics system alongside Tatum and Brown, and the offensive implications are staggering. If a defense commits sufficient attention to Curry to genuinely contest his three-point attempts, Tatum and Brown operate in a more open environment than they have ever experienced simultaneously. If a defense adjusts its attention toward Tatum or Brown, Curry's gravity ensures that the space he creates through off-ball movement and screening actions translates immediately into open looks that he converts at a rate that is historically unmatched. The three-way threat creates a defensive problem that has no solution. There is no scheme in basketball that can simultaneously account for Curry's off-ball gravity, Tatum's creation ability off the dribble, and Brown's physicality and shot-making in the mid-range and at the rim. You can try to solve two of the three problems. The third will destroy you. The Celtics' three-point shooting data adds further context to why Curry's specific skill set fits Boston's system so perfectly. The Celtics in the 2025-2026 season ranked 6th in the NBA in three-point attempts per game, but only 14th in three-point shooting percentage. That gap between volume and efficiency reflects a team that is committed to the analytical principle of generating three-point attempts, but that lacks the elite individual shooter whose gravity and shot-making can elevate the collective numbers. Curry does not just add his own elite shooting to the team's totals. His gravity and the shot creation he generates for others through screening, cutting, and defensive attraction elevates the efficiency of every other shooter around him. Studies of lineup data from Golden State's dynasty years consistently showed that teammates shot significantly better with Curry on the floor than off it, not because Curry was actively setting them up on every possession, but because his gravity created the space in which those shots were taken from positions and with degrees of defensive pressure that are more conducive to efficiency. The pace and transition data is another analytical dimension that favors this trade strongly. Curry is historically one of the most dangerous players in transition, and in the early offensive set before defenses can establish their structure. The Celtics under their current system are a good but not elite transition team. Boston ranks in the middle tier of the league for transition points per possession, a figure that reflects a team that is more comfortable in the half court than in the open floor. Curry's presence changes that dynamic immediately because his shooting threat in transition forces defenses to make decisions about how aggressively they can push back on his early offense. A Celtics team that adds transition threat through Curry's ability to hit pull-up threes before defenses set becomes significantly more difficult to prepare for across a 7-game playoff series where preparation and adjustment are the primary tools available to opposing coaches. The playoff context is where the analytical case reaches its most compelling point. The Celtics won the championship in 2024 and have remained contenders since, but the specific challenge of winning a championship in the current NBA landscape is that the pool of legitimate title contenders is deeper than it has been for a decade. The Oklahoma City Thunder have built something exceptional around Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. The Denver Nuggets with Nikola Jokic remain a legitimate threat whenever their health allows. The Phoenix Suns and the Miami Heat retain the organizational intelligence to be dangerous in a series. And the Los Angeles teams in both conferences present regular challenges in the playoffs. Adding Curry to the Celtics does not just make them better. It creates a separation between Boston and the rest of the field that is qualitatively different from simply being the best team by a small margin. Championship teams in the modern NBA are built around the principle of having more elite offensive options in crunch time than any opposing defense can neutralize simultaneously. The Celtics currently have 2 such options in Tatum and Brown. Adding Curry gives them three players who can each individually take and make the shots that decide playoff games in the final 2 minutes of close games. 3 players each of whom a defense would rationally choose to close out first in a scramble situation. The mathematics of that situation favor the Celtics in every scenario. If 2 of them are contained in crunch time, the third is open. In a league where most teams have 1 crunch time option and elite teams have 2, a team with 3 becomes something that conventional playoff preparation cannot handle. Now the trade construction and what a realistic package might look like, because the basketball case is compelling but the financial and roster mechanics have to work for both sides. Golden State's primary motivation in any trade of Curry is to receive assets that accelerate their rebuild while ensuring Curry lands in an environment where he can compete for the title his final elite years deserve. The Warriors need young players with upside, draft capital to rebuild around, and potentially a player who can be the face of their next phase. The Celtics have all 3 categories available. A realistic trade framework that satisfies both sides would likely center on Peyton Pritchard, who has developed into a genuinely valuable guard with shooting ability and playmaking that fits what Golden State needs in their backcourt going forward. Alongside Pritchard, the Celtics would need to include at least one of their accumulated first-round picks, likely an unprotected pick in a draft cycle where Boston's sustained success makes the pick less immediately valuable, but where its unprotected nature makes it attractive to a rebuilding organization with a longer time horizon. The addition of a young frontcourt piece from Boston's depth, potentially alongside a salary filler to make the financial numbers work under the cap constraints both teams are navigating, rounds out the framework. The exact construction would require significant negotiation, and the involvement of a third team to facilitate the salary matching may be necessary, depending on where the final numbers land. But the principle is straightforward. Boston sends useful contributors and future assets. Golden State receives the building blocks of their next era. Curry gets to compete for another championship in the final window of his career. And the Celtics become the most complete offensive team in the NBA. The historical precedent for this kind of late-career superstar trade to a contender suggests the outcomes tend to be positive for the receiving team when the fit is right. LeBron James going to the Lakers at 33 was widely questioned and produced a championship 3 years later. Kevin Garnett going to Boston at 31 transformed the Celtics from a middle-tier team to immediate champions. Curry at 37 is a different proposition from those examples in terms of age, but his specific skill set, reliant on shooting, movement, and basketball intelligence rather than athleticism, ages better than the power and quickness that define those players. Curry at 37 is closer to the player he was at 32 than Garnett at 33 was to himself at 28. The degradation curve for his specific type of player is slower, and the analytical evidence of his current season numbers supports the case that his elite window remains genuinely open. The reaction from coaching and front office circles, filtered through the media reporting around the story, has been consistent in one observation. Every team in the league would want Steph Curry, if the price were right. The question is whether the Celtics have constructed the specific package that makes Golden State choose them over other suitors. The answer to that question depends on conversations happening right now at the highest levels of both organizations, and the reporting suggests those conversations are closer to genuine negotiation than exploratory discussion. If this trade happens, and the momentum of the current reporting cycle suggests it is closer to reality than at any previous point in the speculation, the Celtics become the immediate favorites for the NBA championship. Not the favorites alongside 2 or 3 other teams in the way contender conversations typically work. The favorites in the sense that every other team in the league would be calculating how to limit the damage rather than genuinely believing they can outperform a Tatum, Brown, and Curry combination across 7 games. The basketball case is overwhelming. The financial structure is navigable. The players' interest is genuine. And the front office on both sides has the intelligence and the relationship infrastructure to make complex deals work. Steph Curry to the Boston Celtics is no longer a fantasy. It is a genuine basketball story with real momentum and potentially historic implications for one of the most storied franchises in the sport.